The city of Eureka in Humboldt County, California, is sometimes referred to as the heart of the U.S. Redwood Coast. However, on the downside, when compared to other locations with comparable populations, Eureka is ranked among the most dangerous cities in the nation. Eureka has a violent crime rate of 38.4, which is higher than the 22.7 national average. The town of Eureka was completely devastated by a horrifying crime that occurred there back in 1997. Slightly north of Eureka, in the deep Ryan Slough, a duck hunter found the severed torso of a woman on October 26, 1997. After notifying the Humboldt County Sheriff Department, an investigation into the matter was started right away. The torso had been stabbed 27 times and was cut down the middle, and the head, arms, legs, and breasts had all been chopped off. The detectives tried numerous times to identify the victim, but were never successful. Nevertheless, they estimated that the woman was between 18 and 25 years old, did not smoke, and had previously given birth. For a little while, this reduced the number on their list, but there was no luck. While the investigation to identify the slain woman continued, a little over 2 months later, in January 1998, an arm of a female body was found and recovered on Clam Beach, which is about 20 miles north of the Ryan Slough. The arm was found to belong to the same woman whose remains were found near Eureka. Her head, another arm, and some of her legs were still missing though. The Humboldt County Sheriff Department put in a lot of overtime and effort to identify the victim, but it appeared to be an insurmountable task, given the lack of clues and the severely decomposed state of the remains. Months passed with virtually no development in the case. The woman's identity was still unknown. But as 1998 drew to a close, a startling twist in the case caught the investigator off guard and fundamentally changed the direction of the investigation. Wayne Adam Ford, then 36, entered the main Humboldt County Sheriff Department station on Tuesday, November 3, 1998, with the intention of making an odd confession. Rodney Calvin Ford, Wayne's brother, was also present. While the detectives searched him, Wayne was found to be in possession of a woman's severed body part that was sealed in a Ziploc bag. Wayne stopped trying to hide anything, so he willingly cooperated with the officers. Wayne confessed to the detectives that he had committed several crimes and that he had killed 4 women in the North State, including the nameless woman whose body was discovered in the Ryan Slough in October 1997. Rodney informed the detectives that Wayne had called him on November 2, 1998, stating that he needed assistance with something. Wayne claimed he could no longer keep the secrets and that he wanted to turn himself in. Following Wayne's confession, Rodney persuaded him to come clean and turn himself in to the police, while he attempted to piece together what his brother had done. Wayne told the detectives that he turned himself in because, had he not, he might have killed his ex-wife after admitting to killing 4 women. He refrained from acting solely out of a desire to spare his son from suffering. He expressed regret for the harm he had caused to all those women and revealed that his evil actions were motivated by resentment toward his ex-wife, who is preventing Wayne from seeing their son. Wayne claimed that this infuriated him and caused him to act in heinous ways. Those who knew Wayne said he had been disappointed trying to see his son ever since he and his wife got separated and divorced. Wayne's visitation rights were severely restricted by the terms of his divorce from his ex-wife. On November 3, 1998, Wayne was taken into custody without any delay. Dennis Dewis, the sheriff of Humboldt County, spent 3.5 hours interviewing Wayne in an effort to get detailed information about his victims that would aid in their identification. Wayne claimed to have dismembered 3 of his victims and strangled the other one. Wayne listed 4 women who were hitchhikers. Wayne acknowledged that he had attacked each of them before mutilating and strangling them. Wayne reported to the police that on October 17, 1997, he picked up his first victim, whom he thought was a hitchhiker. He continued to describe the horrific events of that day, including how he had attacked her, strangled her, and then severed her body. The possibility that the woman Wayne was referring to could be the one whose remains were discovered in October 1997 occurred to the detectives. However, Wayne did not seem to remember the name or face of that woman. During the course of the investigation, detectives searched places where Wayne had lived and discovered more remains that they believed belonged to the unidentified woman. The investigators also discovered that Wayne attempted to cook some of the unidentified woman's remains and stored them in his trailer's freezer for nearly a year. The woman's identity remained a mystery despite this information, and numerous body parts were still missing. Tina Renee Gibbs, a Las Vegas prostitute who is 28 years old, is the second victim that Wayne picked up sometime in 1998. Tina's naked body was discovered on June 2, 1998, in the California Aqueduct, close to the Kern County town of Buttonwillow. Tina was the only known victim of Wayne's that had not had her body severed. She had been strangled to death. In September 1998, 4 months after he had attacked and killed Tina, Wayne picked his third victim and struck again. This time, he picked up a 25-year-old Fontana prostitute named Lynette Dion White, next to an Ontario truck. On September 25, 1998, Lynette's nude body was found floating in a San Joaquin County irrigation canal. The exact cause of Lynette's death was still unknown, but it was thought to be homicidal violence with an unclear ideology. Wayne admitted to the detectives that he had paid Lynette to stay with him for a night, the night she passed away. Wayne killed 29 years old Patricia Ann Tamez less than a month later. She was his fourth and final victim before he turned himself in. On October 23, 1998, Patricia's naked body was discovered floating in the California Aqueduct in San Bernardino County, close to Hesperia. One of her breasts had been chopped off and she had been strangled. When Wayne entered the police station to turn himself in, this was the body part he had been carrying in the Ziploc bag for over a week. Patricia was taken by Wayne from a convenience store, and similar to Tina, he paid her to stay the night. Sadly, Patricia also did not make it. Patricia's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a possible thoracic spine fracture, as well as a broken neck beneath her shoulders. Wayne was being held at the Humboldt County Jail on murder charges, with a $1 million bail. The detectives reported that Wayne was contrite and seemed to have come to a realization about his involvement in certain things in life. Wayne's past was investigated further by the authorities to see if he had been involved in any other killings. On December 3, 1961, Wayne Adam Ford was born in Petaluma, California. He was the second child born to an immigrant German mother and an American father. When he was 10 years old, his parents divorced, which had a lasting impact on his life and led him to enroll in the U.S. Marine Corps after dropping out of high school. Before receiving an honorable discharge in 1985, he served for 6 years. Wayne was struck by an inebriated driver in an accident that occurred in November of 1980. He suffered a head injury in the accident and spent 9 days in a coma. Wayne's family claims that following that incident, his personality underwent a significant transformation. Wayne began to experience psychological problems in 1983, and these problems only got worse over time, necessitating multiple hospital stays. Wayne received a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder not long afterward. Wayne had several run-ins with the law in the years that followed, including accusations that he had beaten and robbed a prostitute in Garden Grove, California, in 1986. He was taken into custody in 1990 on charges of animal abuse, and he spent a little time behind bars in San Clemente, California. Wayne was a bad husband to both of his wives, who eventually filed for divorce. After he had 2 marriages, Wayne worked as a long-haul truck driver and lived in a trailer park in Arcata, California, between 1997 and 1998, the year of the murders. In a San Bernardino County court on June 27, 2006, Wayne was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he received a death sentence in August of 2006. He is currently incarcerated in San Quentin State Prison in California on death row. Investigators never gave up trying to identify the unidentified female victim of Wayne over the years. In an effort to find leads, they frequently examined missing person reports from the entire West Coast. They even tried using DNA databases to try and identify her. The woman's DNA was added to the National Unidentified Persons DNA Index, as well as the California Missing Persons DNA database. The DNA profile was regularly compared in the combined index system with profiles of other remains and missing persons. Regretfully, there was never a profile match. The woman's identity was still a mystery. William Honsall, the sheriff of Humboldt County, established a cold case unit in 2021 and tasked 2 investigators with the sole responsibility of reviewing and examining their department's unresolved cases in search of fresh leads. In December 2022, the Humboldt County Sheriff Department collaborated with the California Department of Justice and Othram, a forensic genealogy lab, to investigate the possibility of using advanced forensic DNA testing to identify the unidentified woman or a close relative. Courtesy of detectives, Othram received a DNA sample from the woman's preserved remains. Forensic genome sequencing was employed by Othram scientists to create a thorough DNA profile of the woman. By using this profile for forensic genealogy, the investigators were able to find a possible DNA match that took them to Kathy Cummings. Investigators speculated that Kathy may be a close relative of the woman who was never identified. The detectives got in touch with Kathy and inquired about any missing family members. According to her statement, Kerry Ann Cummings, her sister, had vanished from the mid-1990s. The detectives asked Kathy about the last time she had any communication with Kerry. Pushing herself to focus more, Kathy remembered the last time she had seen her sister Kerry, which was in 1997. After obtaining a sample of Kathy's DNA, investigators compared it to the sample found on the deceased woman. At last, there was a match. The remains of Kerry Ann Cummings were formally identified in June 2023. Kerry was, as it turned out, only 25 years old when she was killed. Kerry's identity had been unknown for 25 years, but it was no longer a mystery. To provide Kerry's family some closure, the detectives contacted them and told them of Kerry's tragic case. Kerry's sister Kathy informed the detectives that although she was a lovely, intelligent and humorous woman, she was suffering from an untreated mental illness. Before the family lost contact with her in 1997, she was couch surfing in Eugene, Oregon. Kathy claims that her family attempted to file a missing persons report for Kerry in 1997 when she was reported missing in Oregon and Arizona, but for various reasons, the report was never filed. Kerry's family was informed that she was an adult who had made her own lifestyle choices. There was nothing the police could do if she posed no threat to herself or others. Kerry was never added to any national databases or listed as missing as a result of this. The investigators hoped that this identification would help provide some closure and peace of mind, even though they were aware that they could not ease Kerry's family's suffering. In addition to giving them pride, Kerry's case gave them hope that more cases like hers could be resolved with perseverance. The Humboldt County Coroner's Division is currently working to return Kerry's remains to her family so that a fitting funeral and burial can take place. Wayne Adam Ford is still incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison on death row, while the detectives continue to be committed to reviewing cold cases in collaboration with Othram and the California Department of Justice. With a population of roughly 3,000, Provincetown is a small coastal resort town in Massachusetts, USA. It is well known for its harbor, beaches, artistic community, and tourism sector. The LGBT community also finds it to be a popular vacation spot. A 12-year-old girl who was following a barking dog made a horrifying discovery on July 26, 1974. In the Race Point dunes, she discovered the decaying body of an unknown woman. Only a few yards from a road, the body was lying face down on half of a beach blanket. Under her head, there were Wrangler jeans and a blue bandana, and her long auburn or red hair was pulled back into a ponytail with a gold-flecked elastic band. The woman was almost severed to death. Her toenails were painted pink, and there was no indication of a struggle. It was found that she had been crushed on one side of her head, most likely with a military-style entrenching tool. It was established that this head injury was the reason for her demise. Upon reaching the scene, the police were perplexed as to the identity of the woman, her journey here, and the identity of her killer. Tire tracks were discovered 50 yards from the scene, and 2 sets of footprints led to the body. According to police theories, the woman may have been asleep when she was killed, or she may have known her killer. The woman's features were ascertained by the police, who found that she weighed 66 kg, was of an athletic build, and stood about 5'6" inches tall. She was also in the age range of 25 to 40. She underwent pricey dental procedures, such as crowns, that could have cost $5,000 to $10,000. Still, a number of her teeth were extracted. In addition, one forearm and both of her hands were gone. At the time, some investigators thought the murderer had removed these body parts in an effort to conceal their own identity or the identity of the victim. The victim's face was crushed and disfigured, and her hands were missing, making fingerprints impossible to identify. Neither her body nor her inner garments contained any identification that the police could find. The case became even more difficult for the investigators because of this lack of evidence. Putting the murder victim's skull and teeth together was a task given to Dr. Stanley M. Schwartz, the state dental forensic examiner and head of diagnosis at Tufts University Dental School. He recreated the woman's teeth, jaw, and skull. A clay model of her features was made by forensic anthropologist Dr. Clyde Snow of the Federal Aviation Administration's Civil Air Medical Institute. In a last-ditch effort to find leads, images of the model and artist renderings of the sculpture were shared across the nation. In an attempt to identify the dentist who had completed the pricey dental work, authorities also contacted thousands of dentists and published articles about the case in police and detective magazines, as well as dental journals. Although dental records were provided, none of them matched. James J. Meads, the chief of Provincetown Police, was committed to cracking the case of the unidentified woman. In an effort to spark interest and collect leads, he made appearances on network television and in national magazines. He also made a lot of trips in pursuit of every lead he could find. Meads was contacted by thousands of people via phone calls and letters, claiming to have information about the victim or her killer, but all of the leads were fruitless. The case, however, stayed unsolved, but the public's curiosity about it kept growing. The identity of the victim and the brutality of her murder captivated people. They were curious as to who killed her and why she was killed. The victim gained an unofficial nickname as the Lady of the Dunes, and the case turned into a national obsession. A Canadian woman claimed to have witnessed her father choke a woman in Massachusetts in the early years of 1972, and she shared this information with a friend in 1987. When police followed up on the tip, they were unable to find either the woman or her father. A different woman reported to the police that the composite sketch of the Lady of the Dunes resembled her sister who vanished from Boston in 1974. Police looked into this as well, but they produced no conclusive results. Additionally, detectives pursued a lead concerning Rory Jean Kessinger, a criminal who went missing. Kiesinger had escaped from prison in 1973 and would have been 25 years old at the time of the murder. Although Kiesinger and the victim bore some resemblance, the victim's DNA did not match Kiesinger's mother's sample, according to police reports. Even though the case went cold over the years, the police never gave up. They never gave up on their investigation or their quest to identify the victim. A CT scan of the skull was conducted in May 2010, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children used the scan images to produce another reconstruction. The Lady of the Dunes skeletal remains were sent to Othram, a private lab that specializes in DNA testing, in 2022. From the remains, Othram was able to create a DNA profile, which was subsequently provided to FBI agents. The FBI investigators performed a genealogy search using the DNA profile. In order to conduct this search, the DNA profile was compared to DNA samples provided by volunteers for databases like GEDmatch. The victim's distant relatives were identified by the FBI, thanks to an investigative lead obtained through a genealogical search. Following that, the FBI carried out additional research, which finally allowed them to identify the victim as 37-year-old Ruth Marie Terry. Although Ruth's identity provided some closure in the Lady of the Dunes case, it also sparked new inquiries, such as why Ruth was in Provincetown, who took her life, and what was the reason behind their extreme measures to hide her identity. Authorities chose to delve deeper into her past in order to provide answers to these queries, and on September 8, 1936, they found that she was born in Whitwell, Tennessee, in a mountainside shack. Johnny Terry and Eva Terry were her parents. Ruth moved from Whitwell to Livonia, Michigan, to work at the Fisher Body automotive plant in 1957. She gave birth to her son Richard at this same period. The identity of the child's father is unknown. She was unable to take care of the child, though, because of her financial situation. In exchange for her debts being paid off, she permitted her boss, Richard Hanchett Sr., to adopt her son. Ruth relocated to California following the adoption's completion and left Livonia. Ruth tried to contact her son in 1972, but he was not ready to see her. He had overdosed on drugs and was unconscious for 18 days at that point. Luckily, he made it through the ordeal. Ruth married Guy Rockwell Moldavine, an antique thief from Reno, Nevada, in February 1974. The couple paid a visit to Ruth's family in Whitwell, Tennessee, 4 months before her death. Later, Brittany Novoglonsky, Ruth's grandniece, recalled that Ruth did not feel like herself when she was with Moldavine. She claimed that Ruth appeared scared of him and that he was domineering and possessive. The couple traveled to Chattanooga to see Terry's half-brother, Kenneth, and his wife, Carole, following their visit with Ruth's family. Afterwards, Kenneth and Carol remember that Terry and Moldavine informed them that they were going to visit America in search of antiques. Kenneth also mentioned that as they were leaving, they talked about going to Massachusetts. Moldavine surprised Ruth Marie Terry's family in Tennessee by paying them a surprise visit in the late summer of 1974. Although he stated that Ruth was missing from their California home, he did not provide a reason for her disappearance. All he could say to them was that he had no idea where she was. After that, James, Ruth's brother, went to California to employ a private investigator to locate her. The investigator informed James and the other family members that Ruth had left the state voluntarily after joining a religious cult and that all of her possessions had been sold. Ruth was listed as deceased in obituaries in the years that followed, indicating that her family thought she had passed away. They never did hear from anyone confirming her passing, though. Moldavine became the main suspect in Ruth's death after information about his strange behavior and his enigmatic return to Tennessee became public. The police declared they were looking for additional details regarding Moldavine. They started a renewed investigation into his past and life, and they found some startling things. Abram Albert Zadworanski, Moldovan, and Sylvia Lily Silverblatt, adopted Moldovan, who was born on October 27, 1923. Moldovan was a student at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1942 while residing in New York City. Because of a mastoid infection, he was unable to serve in the military during World War. Following his marriage to Joellen in 1946, Moldovan lived in Seattle, Washington, and New York, California, where he worked as a disc jockey. In 1956, the marriage ended in divorce. Moldovan wed Manzanita Eileen Manzi Ryan in Kootenai County, Idaho, 2 years later, in 1958. Dolores Ann Mearns, who was 18 at the time, was Manzanita's daughter from a previous marriage. On April 1960, both women disappeared inexplicably, and Moldovan became the main suspect. He ran away from Seattle, but was caught by the FBI and charged with escaping the law in order to avoid testifying about their deaths. A freshly sealed septic tank contained fragments of the human body and tissue that law enforcement found during a search of the residences Moldovan had shared with Manzanita. Authorities, however, were unable to confirm that the remains are that of either of the two missing women. Moldovan was never charged because the King County prosecutor was reluctant to file charges in relation to their disappearances without a body. In King County, Washington, Moldovan married Evelyn Marie Emerson, not long after Manzanita and her daughter, Dolores, vanished. After Moldovan's second wife disappeared, Moldovan was found guilty of defrauding Evelyn's family of $10,000. He was given a 15-year prison sentence in 1961, but it was suspended in March 1962 in exchange for him repaying the money. Moldovan was also found to be the main suspect by the authorities in the 1950 murder of Henry Lawrence Baird and the abduction of Barbara Jo Kelly. On June 17, 1950, Baird, a 28-year-old bread truck driver, was last observed going on a date in Humboldt County, California, with Kelly, a 17-year-old waitress. Baird's body was found face down on a beach close to Table Bluff the next morning. With the exception of his shoes and socks, he was completely nude after being shot in the back of the head. Under Baird's corpse, Kelly's personal belongings were discovered, folded and tucked in. Kelly herself was never found again. Whoever shot Baird is thought to have kidnapped her. Moldovan was formally identified as Ruth's murderer on August 28, 2023. But he had no way of paying for his crimes. At the age of 78, he passed away in March 2002. Although the mystery surrounding Ruth's death had been resolved, it would remain unclear how Moldovan killed her. Ruth's loved ones may never learn the whole truth about her death, but now that her murderer has been apprehended, they can at last feel some sense of closure. On March 17, 2015, a hiker walking the Lone Mountain Trail in Carson City noticed a shoe sticking out of the ground and alerted authorities, who found the buried body of a woman wrapped in a sleeping bag. Authorities estimated that the woman had passed away about a year before she was discovered. Investigators followed the usual procedure to identify the woman, but were unable to, and she became a Jane Doe. The Carson City Sheriff's Office brought the case to the DNA Doe Project in 2019 to attempt to investigate genetic genealogy to trace the Jane Doe's identity, using DNA matches to build her family tree. After a complex series of laboratory processes to extract DNA and translate it into a workable profile for a comparison to the millions of records in the databases, volunteer investigative genetic genealogists got to work in May 2020. The DNA Doe project said since research began, more than 13 volunteers have worked to connect the matches with family trees, going back to ancestors born in the mid-1700s in England. It took a little less than a year to narrow the search to a single family in the vast tree. 3 of the 6 siblings were women, and this lead was offered to the investigating officers to follow up. In October 2022, a family member of the Jane Doe's ancestry DNA test was uploaded to gedmatch.com, a public database that can be used by law enforcement cases. After this DNA match, investigators confirmed that the Jane Doe is Joyce Rogers Annis, originally from Michigan. In addition to providing the critical lead to this identification, the DNA Doe project team also provided information about a man associated with Joyce who later confessed to burying her body on Lone Mountain. It turned out that 72-year-old Joyce passed away due to natural causes, and her husband, Edward Barton, buried her in the mountain. They were homeless and had no money for a funeral. Unfortunately, there is no way to prove or disprove Edward Barton's version of events, and the case is currently considered solved.